Welcome all. I'd like to start tonight's video by apologizing for the extensive gap between entries. Between work, life in general, and collecting stories, it can get a little hectic. Oh, and if you wouldn't mind doing so, please stick around until the end of the video, as I have a little extra information I would like to share with you on where you can submit encounters of your own. Anyhow, in this entry, you'll be listening to several encounters with the paranormal. From spirits in the middle of nowhere to those imitating relatives in the same house. So, to avoid making this intro any longer, let us delve deeper into the unknown. My granddad used to own a motorbike and loved going out on long rides. One evening, when he was on his way back, he saw a lady on the side of the road, walking alone and not appropriately dressed for the weather. It was a crisp, cold autumn evening. He stopped and asked her if she'd like a ride home, and she agreed. He noted that she looked white, blue, in tone, in terms of her skin, but thought nothing of it. She just looked cold, and like she wanted to get home. He gave her his helmet and asked her where she lived. She gave the street address, hopped onto the bike behind my granddad, and off they went. He felt her holding him around his waist the entire journey. When he arrived on the street where she lived and turned to tell her she's home, she'd completely disappeared, along with his helmet. After I heard this story, I looked it up online. I searched the road name where he picked her up from, and whether anyone else has picked up a phantom hitchhiker in that area. Lo and behold, I found a few other stories from the same road, describing the same woman and the same experience, going to the same place. Apparently, a lady has passed from a car accident on that road and had been spotted and picked up by people on motorbikes for years. This was more than a few years ago that my granddad relayed this story to me. He's since passed. When I try to search for it now, nothing comes up, and I can't find anything about it anymore. It's as if she never even existed. I am a 16-year-old high school student who lives in Mongolia, and a very strange thing happened to me that made me question my beliefs back in March. I walked my girlfriend to her home late at night, probably around 10:30. Our homes were not that far away, so I'd usually walk back to my home after walking her home, but it was late, so I decided to take a bus back that night. When I got into the bus, there was no one except this elderly old man. He was sitting at the back of the bus. I didn't really think anything about him, as I took the seat around the middle section of the bus. At the moment I sat down, he got up and took a seat behind me. I was quite annoyed, thinking that he would start small talk with me, something that I hate a lot, and he told me a very weird thing. "Boy, you can see ghosts. Are you even aware of your ability? But you can't differentiate ghosts from a living person. You need to learn how to do it. Also, those you look at every day are just harmless things. But if a ghost talks to you, that is something to be afraid of," he said. I thought the man was mad and didn't believe in anything he said. After all, everyone knows me as the biggest atheist ever. There was some psychics who said that I have an ability to see ghosts, but never took them seriously before, and this man was no different. When I stood to leave the bus, I realized that I was actually alone on it, and the elderly man was not there. My bus stop was one after the stop where I boarded, so there is no way he could have left the bus before me, unless that 90-ish-year-old man jumped through the window of a moving vehicle. It was really scary after I realized the old man basically told me to fear him. Edit. After I posted this, I asked my mom if she had noticed anything. She said she can't recall any instances of me seeing ghosts when I was little, but she said that I saved her life one time. She was on a trip outside the city we lived in one day. I was probably about 3 or 4. Just the night before she left where she was planning to go back to the city with a taxi, but I called her crying and screaming, begging her not to come home with a taxi, because I dreamt of a terrible accident, and she died in it. Mom didn't think anything of it at the time, but she decided to board a train back home. After she arrived, the news said there was a terrible accident on the road. If she had taken the taxi, she would have been on that road, could have been injured, or even worse. died in an accident. I don't have a memory of any of that ever happening. That is the only thing she can recall about anything supernatural with me. When I was around 11 or 12, I would sleep in my sister's room all the time. She had moved away to college at this point, and the room was empty and always clean. It was a nice escape whenever my room was too hot or cluttered to sleep in. Her room had a large, creaky bed and laid on a huge rose detailed bed frame. The whole room has accents of pink, peeling wallpaper, and an old mirror hung on the back of the door, which faces the bed. The door was old, solid wood. It was weighed down by the mirror and always remained shut, since it could never stay open on its own. One night, I decided to sleep in my sister's room, since mine was way too messy to feel comfortable in. It was around 12 a.m., and I was still wide awake. The room was completely dark, except for my phone illuminating the room, as I watched YouTube. I was laying on my side, facing away from the closed door. I suddenly got an extremely eerie feeling, as if someone was watching me. I decided to switch the sides I was laying on and brush off any suspicion. As I turned my face to the door, I saw it was wide open, and standing in the doorway was a human, childlike figure. I couldn't make out a face, but I could see the silhouette almost perfectly. I could tell it was staring right at me. I shut my eyes as hard as I could and turned my head to the wall opposite of the door. I remember praying and reciting as many Bible verses as I could muster up. After a few minutes of silence and the feeling of sheer terror, I finally decided to peek my head back towards the door, ready to face my death. To my surprise, the door was latched shut as always, and the figure had disappeared. I still have no idea how I fell asleep that night. The next morning, I walked downstairs for some breakfast and overheard my mom telling my dad that she had a dream about a little boy watching her sleep last night. Where to begin? When I was around 9 or 10, my family moved into this huge, creepy house in Manchester, Tennessee. The first time I seen it, I said it looked like a witch's castle. It was more a colonial style with 2 pillars out front, red brick, white trim. Inside had high 12-foot ceilings. It was a 3-story home with an unfinished basement. Somewhere around 36 or 38 rooms total. Can't really remember that detail. It was extremely spooky looking, to say the least. The first occurrence happened while everyone was still moving in. It sounded like, and felt like, something massive fell from the 2nd floor to the 1st floor. Shook the house. Everyone, 6 people total, searched, but we found nothing. Things got weirder. Heard footsteps on the 3rd floor. Knockings. Things seemed to happen to my uncle and me mostly. One time my uncle, who had an antique business on the 1st floor, in the front half of the house, heard kids running upstairs to our living area. He went to yell at us and discovered nobody there. He heard my parents arguing loudly, and they sometimes did that. In their room once, clearly heard a man and woman's voice, although couldn't make out the words, and as soon as he entered their room to get them to settle, the voices stopped. Sometimes, my uncle would prank me by coming to my door and knocking. Just stand there and wait for me to come answer. One night, somewhere between midnight and 2 a.m., I heard the knock. Always been a night owl. So I'm in my room playing video games and heard 3 distinct raps on my door. I ignored it, and this has happened 2 more times. The 3rd time scared the hell out of me. The knocks were different, heavier. It made the hair stand on the back of my neck and gave me goosebumps. I looked towards the door, and it was slowly creeping open. My fear turned into being straight pissed off, because I thought my uncle took the prank too far. A second later, I opened the door and stood face to face with an empty hallway. This all happened quickly between the last knock and me entering the hall. Absolutely no way someone could have went any direction without me hearing or seeing them. Another time, I had the brilliant idea to try to get the ghost to do something. So I threw snowballs at the house and kept mocking it. Being a kid, I didn't think anything would happen. But when I went inside, I heard a voice on the staircase. It sounded like something dead trying to talk. That's the best way I can describe it. Again, nobody there. Shortly after that incident, I found out that the house was once a funeral parlor. My uncle, the history buff, did some research and showed me. Another time, we were standing outside in the front of the house, talking. Above the front door, on the second floor, was a door that went to nowhere. Someone had removed the balcony and just sealed it up. My uncle and I always called it the door to nowhere. There was windows on both sides of the door to nowhere, and curtains up. While talking with my uncle, we both see hands part the middle of those drapes. Then, we see another pair of hands open the drapes to the right, in the window. It sure as hell looked like two separate people looking out. We thought my grandma had gotten up there, which she was in no shape to be going upstairs with her bad health. And both of us hightailed our butts to that room on the second story. Nothing. All the rooms were locked, and had a certain type of skeleton key to open them with. Grandma was downstairs. There are several more instances I can remember. One time, right before dark, I seen what I thought was my grandmother looking out a window. Turned out, it was definitely not her, as she was all the way at the back of the house cooking, and by this time, she was slow and had to use a walker. The scariest thing to happen involved my uncle being in the house alone. My parents separated and divorced. My grandma was in the hospital with catatonic schizophrenia. My uncle had locked the place up nice and tight. He even checked the rooms in the upper floors, making sure no customers were up there. He was walking down the rear staircase, which led to the den. He looked right towards my granny's room, and standing in the doorway, as Grandma's bedroom light was always on, as were a few other lights in the house, was a black shadow. Keep in mind that the doorway itself was probably 7 or 8 feet tall. He said the damn thing was oddly human-shaped, yet not. The shadow blocked out the light to the bedroom. It was that dark. If it had been a person, the shadow would have been cast along the floor, not standing straight in the doorway. He said he jumped down the rest of the 4 steps. Knowing my uncle, this was definitely out of his character. Turned immediately left and bolted into his room. Said he stayed with his back to the door for an hour or more, before he had the courage to peek out and look across the den to see if it was gone. It was. Here's the messed up part. After he seen what I can only think of as a demonic entity, he decided to sleep in the den that night. Hell to the no. I would have been in bumfuck Egypt somewhere, sleeping in my car or something. Sometime later that week, he was asleep on the couch in the den, sometime in the wee hours of the morning, when it sounded like my dad was pounding on the door that led from the main staircase to the rear staircase. He called up the stairs that he was going to call the cops if my dad didn't stop. Before he got to the door, he pounded 2 more times. Of course, when he checked, nobody was there. He double-checked every room and window in the house, looked outside and everything, and found no trace of anyone. Note: I had a turtle-shaped necklace. This will be important later. This was a few years back, so I can't remember all the details. I was watching, or messing, on an electronic while my mom was upstairs working. It was pretty late, and I had put my necklace on my teddy bear, since I had a bad habit of sleeping with accessories on. My door was left open, and the hall was pitch black. I hated the dark, and looked away from my door, when all of a sudden, I heard a noise from the hall. I knew it wasn't my mom, because she was going to be working a little bit longer this night. I had heard this noise getting closer to me, and I was getting terrified. The void seemed to be caving in, closer and closer. I heard some sort of voice saying, "Necklace." Nothing else. So I grabbed my turtle necklace with a bit of struggle, with the voice getting louder. Once I put it on, everything stopped. Dead silence. I was very freaked out. I stayed up an hour before I felt safe. I'm not going to lie. I thought I was going to die that night. I want to start by saying I am sorry if my wording in any place is a bit off. This happened about 2 weeks ago. Anyhow, my aunt likes to leave on random trips throughout the year. Normally, my grandfather will help her out and go feed her dog. But I do not believe he ever stayed over since he doesn't live that far from her. Well, this time, my granddad was busy, so she asked if I could help out. She told me she would pay me, and I could have her house to myself. Her home is new. She had it built for her, so I said sure, why not? I could always use the alone time. The day of, she came and picked me up to bring me to her home to look after her dog and just hang out. She was going to be gone for a few days, so I brought my laptop and electronics so I wouldn't be super bored. She kinda lives off in the middle of nowhere. She does have neighbors, but the location just seems out of the way from the town, so she drops me off and I headed inside and just watched some TV after feeding her dog. I remember falling asleep on the couch and having a horrible nightmare the first night, but I didn't think a lot of it because I do have nightmares from time to time. It just kinda happens. And the second night is when things started to happen that I couldn't explain. I was playing BDO on my laptop at the kitchen table just to pass some time when the dog started to bark and it made me jump. I will note, there are a lot of kids that play outside in this neighborhood, so I thought she was barking at one of the kids. I got up and brought her back into the living room. She laid down, but was still making weird whimpers. Like she wanted to bark, but knew not to. So I just sat with her for a while and pet her to calm her down. I knew she got overly excited when she saw kids playing, because she likes to run and join them. After I fed her that night, there was a loud bang from upstairs. I thought it was weird, because how my aunt's house is set up, the upstairs is not where bedrooms are. She had an attic-like space built for basically an office/workout room. Everything else is on the main floor. I thought maybe a weight or something fell. I went upstairs to see nothing was misplaced. I was just confused and looked around the room, seeing if just something fell that I didn't notice. I couldn't find anything. I went down the stairs to see the dog staring at me, but when I moved out of the way, she was still staring at the stairs. I thought, okay, creepy. But I chalked it up to her being weird and shut the door. I decided that night to not sleep on the couch, rather, sleep in the bed. I went to sleep in one of my cousin's rooms, but they're children, so their beds aren't super comfortable. I figured my aunt wouldn't mind me sleeping in her bed since I was watching the house, so I got in my PJs and headed into her room. I climbed onto her bed and got comfy, turning the TV on shortly after. My aunt's room is interesting in layout, so I'll do my best to describe it. You have the main bedroom that has her bed against the right wall, dresser on the side of it against the wall, and a dresser against the wall in front of the bed where a TV is mounted above it. Along the left wall is a small hallway that has 2 doors, one leading to her ensuite bathroom and then to her closet. I was laying in her bed against the wall in case the dog wanted to jump up. She had room. I knew my aunt let her sleep up there. I had a random TV show on, I don't really remember, because I was on my phone playing a few random games to get me tired. I fell asleep and had another nightmare. There was this dark shadow watching me in my dream. It was just out of the corner of my eye, but he was always there. Other things happened in my dream, but I don't feel the need to explain. Either way, I woke up in the middle of the night because of it. I decided I wanted some water, so I got out of bed and walked out to the kitchen. I got some water and headed back to her bedroom. I came in to see her dog staring at the small hallway in her room. Yeah, I didn't like that one bit, so I walked back out to the couch and called her, but she seemed too scared to walk past the hallway. I walked back into the room and tried to bribe her with a treat or something, you know? Nothing. She would not move. She was focused on something in the hallway. I turned the hall light on and showed her there was nothing there. She was not having it. I ran to my aunt's bed and sat by it. I gave up and figured she was just being weird and walked back to the living room. I started texting some friends because I was freaked out at what the hell just happened and wanted to get my mind off it. Sometime later, my aunt's dog runs out of her bedroom and lays on the floor by my feet, only for there to be a loud bang come from her bedroom. I, being too freaked out to go check at the moment, curled up on the couch and pulled her up to hug onto her. I turned the TV on and played it loud. Once I felt more confident, I walked back into my aunt's room and turned the lights on. I turned all of them on. When I got to the hallway, I saw her bathroom door was wide open. I knew it was closed because I hadn't used it, and they keep it closed so the dogs don't get in there. I decided to leave her room and close the door to her room so I wouldn't have to deal with anything in there because I did not want to go near that bathroom. It honestly felt like something was staring at me from in there. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense, but that is what it felt like. For the remainder of the time I was there, I had to deal with more banging and her dog staring at random points in the room. One night, it was so bad, she was physically watching something move from one side of the room to the other. I tried my best to ignore it and focus on my laptop or phone, but man, I never want to spend another night there again. Something seemed to be in my house, walking about, taking the form of me and my brother Sam. I'm 22 and female. Years ago, I was around 10 at the time. I was sleeping in my bed when my brother Sam shouted for me. When I sleepily made my way to the other room where he was using the computer, he asked me why I kept creeping in and out of the room behind him and ignoring him when he asked me what I was doing. The computer is by a window, so you can clearly see the reflection of the room at night. Sam said that he could see me in the reflection messing about behind him. I insisted that I hadn't been up for a few hours and that he was just trying to scare me, but Sam insisted that he saw me. I also had another thing happen a couple of months apart from this story. Sam and I shared a room whilst my own bedroom was being redecorated. I was on the high bunk bed. Sam slept below, and I was a light sleeper. I saw the bedroom door open and saw him leaving. I asked if he could bring me a glass of water, as I had a dry throat. He paused, said nothing, and continued to leave. He never came back in. When morning came, I was going to ask him about it, but he wasn't on his bed. I couldn't find him in the house, so I asked my parents where he'd gone, and it turned out that he was having a sleepover at a friend's house and wasn't at home that night. It then dawned on me, and I remembered that he left yesterday around dinner time to his friend's house. I told my parents that someone opened my bedroom door and stood there, but they just said I was seeing things. At the time I saw the figure, I was very tired. It was very late at night, and I'd clearly forgotten that Sam wasn't home, so thought nothing of it at the time. Creeps me out to this day. This happened a few times a couple years ago, when I was on summer break from college. I was back at my parents' house for the summer, and I would stay up late gaming all the time. When I'd go to bed, I would have to sneak up the creaky old stairs. Having grown up in that house, and needing to sneak up them on numerous occasions, I've memorized which stairs are quiet, and which stairs are the loudest. So up the stairs I snuck, and went to bed. It was a hot summer night, and on those nights, I would leave my bedroom door open because my parents' room was right across the narrow hallway, and they had a window AC unit that would shoot straight into my room. I'm all curled up and ready to go to sleep. About 30 minutes after laying down, I hear from downstairs the bottom step creak. Now, this is an older home, and I realize houses settle and all that jazz, but I've heard the stairs settle before. The whole staircase will kind of crack all at once. No. The bottom step creaked very slowly and deliberately, and then nothing. I close my eyes and play off the sound until the next step creaks, just as slowly and deliberately. There are 14 steps in my parents' house. The creaky stairs are 1, 2, 4, 7, 8, 12, 13, and 14. There's a small landing and a right turn on the 5th and 6th step, so the pattern of creaking stairs continues. Creak. Silence. Creak. Silence. Creak. Silence. The stairs all make the same sound, as if a large man was slowly pulling himself up them. The tricky part with the stairs are the last 3 steps, because they creak the loudest, and they sound different than the rest. They make a distinct rump sound, and the pitch of each subsequent step gets higher. 12 is a low grumble, 13 is a moderate outlet, and 14 is a tenor-like squeak. Those 3 steps only make those sounds when they are stepped on, and those 3 steps made those exact sounds. So obviously, at this point, I have absolutely no idea what to think. There's no one else in the house. Mom and Dad were both already asleep, and all my siblings are older and have their own places. The landing at the top of the steps is an old, wrinkly vinyl that makes a sticky, bubbly sound when you get off the stairs. After a few moments passed since step 14 squeaked, the vinyl crinkles. The narrow hallway from the stairs goes back maybe 7 or 8 feet, and there are 4 doors on the hallway, 2 on each side. To the immediate left leads to 2 bedrooms, and there's no room on the frame. The right is a bedroom with a loud latching door handle. The back left door is my room, whose door can't latch due to the warped door frame. In the back right is my parents'. If you take a step into my room, the thinly carpeted floor creaks a light kind of pop sound. Leading around the room, up to my bedside, are a few more crunchy spots. Whenever I lay into my bed, the last step is a 2-part creak that wheezes when you step, then creaks twice when you lift your foot. The entryway in my room popped. Each individual crunchy spot follows right along, until I hear the floor wheeze at the side of my bed. I have my back to that side of the bed, because I have absolutely no idea what is in my room. And that was when the heavy breathing started. But it wasn't like stereotypical, creepy breathing in horror movies. It was much more throaty, almost like an excited snarl. For what felt like an eternity, it just breathed in and out, and in and out. And then the floor next to my bed cracked twice. And that was it. Silence for the rest of the night. No exiting creaks. No more breathing. It was over. This happened 2 other times, in the exact same order of events, sounding the exact same as well. It only ever happened when I left my door open. Let's be clear here. Paranormal activity isn't uncommon for me. I've had compelling experiences over the course of my life, but this one is quite recent and powerful. It all started after my mother and father took a trip out to a cemetery. She had went to visit her mother's grave, but I have a feeling that someone followed her home, and I have a few ideas of who it might be. Soon after, things started happening. One night, I had been struggling to fall asleep due to the heat, so I turned my fan on. The TV was off, lights were off, so I felt left with the company of the darkness. The fan was quiet, but loud enough for me to hear the rotation of the plastic blades. As I began settling in and became heavily comfortable, I began to hear what sounded like a woman speaking. At first, my mind did not register it, and so I sat for a couple of minutes until my mind did register what was going on. As I listened, I was horrified to learn the woman's voice was coming through the fan. So I turned the TV on and turned it up to drown out the woman and forced myself to sleep. The next morning, I had woken up and lazily traveled to the living room and plopped on the couch. As my brother emerged from his bedroom and did the same, he sat down and looked at me as though something was bothering him. He went on to explain that the previous night he didn't sleep as he heard people talking from the fan in his room, as though people were having a conversation. I promptly told him that I experienced almost the exact same thing, and we both agreed to stay cautious and try and figure out what it was. In the days following, there would be times where my brother would come running from the upstairs area in fear, as he not only continued to hear the voices, but now he was seeing misty-looking shadows moving in the dark. One night, I had gotten up very early in the morning and spent much of the day up and on my feet, so by 4 or 5 in the afternoon, I was exhausted. I decided to call it a day and head to my room before everyone else. I plopped on my bed, turned on the TV, and popped my headphones in and started jamming away. I quickly grew tired and pulled the headphones out of my ears. I regretted it right away, as my skin broke out in goosebumps almost instantly. The same woman who I had heard nights before speaking through my fan was now singing loudly in what sounded like my room over the slightly loud TV. She was singing, "Na na 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 na," with a certain tune. As I noticed this, I searched for the TV remote in complete distress, hoping that maybe the singing was coming from the TV. As I lowered the volume, the woman's voice only grew louder and louder. She had quite a beautiful voice, actually. But I'm convinced that she did this to get my attention. Right after I turned the TV down and started listening to her melodies, it's like she knew that I was aware of her presence. She started humming the melodies of music I was more than familiar with. She had begun to hum the tune of a song that was very emotional and powerful to me. That's when my fear grew by tenfold, because not only am I unaware of who this spirit is, but also because this spirit has developed some sort of personal connection to me to have known this. I continued to listen to this disembodied voice until I gathered the courage to bolt from my room and seek solace downstairs. As I approached my family members, they could tell I was visibly shaken. I sat down next to my brother and began to explain what had just happened upstairs. He suggested that we both go back up there to see if he could hear it too, so my family didn't think I was crazy. As we ascended the steps, the same fear began to return, and something within me knew that spirit wasn't gone. We slowly entered my room, and the woman's voice returned, still as loud as I had left it. My brother's face drained of its color, and we both stared in dismay. We both had just stopped in our tracks, mesmerized by this unknown woman's voice, until my brother grew horrified. I looked at him in confusion until he stuttered out, "The singing is coming from my room." He was right, too. I approached the wall that separated our rooms and leaned my ear against it. The woman's voice was basically pouring from his walls. For a few minutes, we were left in complete shock. My brother ultimately decided that he wanted to open the door and see if someone maybe snuck in and was playing a trick. So together we stood in front of his door, the woman still singing loudly. We glanced to each other and released big sighs before he put his hand on the handle and opened the door with urgency. The woman's voice faded with it, and we didn't hear her after that. We searched his entire room and found nothing. To conclude the encounters in this entry, I would like to share with you guys one that I had experienced in my childhood. So to give you your 10th and final encounter of the night, here is one that I've titled The Clock Room. I hope you enjoy it, and I'd like to know what you think in the comments, but not only about my own, also about the others that you've heard today. Some preface. As a young teen, around 13 through 14, my family moved around a lot. For a while, everywhere we moved was actually in the same town I grew up in, the village of Irondale, Ohio. In one of the homes we moved into, the yellow house. My younger brother and I got to choose our room. Excited to do so, we rushed upstairs and quickly found the room we wanted. And the same reason we picked it was the same reason we'd later regret it. Inside our new room was a much smaller room with a lock on the outside of the door. The clock room. We named it this because inside, there were drawings of all sorts of clocks, from face clocks to dashboard clocks. The small room alone was an odd find, as we knew the previous owners didn't have children, which meant these doodles, all over the bare wood, had been there for ages. My brother joked that he wanted to make it his little hideout, but this never happened. Some time went on, and we learned to keep the lock latched at night, but this did us no good. We did this because after nearly a month of living in the new home, we found that the door would open itself at some point during the night and hang open come morning. Not just a little either, all the way open. Mind you, this is just a small, knee-high, square frame in the wall. It creeped us out, so we locked it. But even then, it would be open every morning. We started accusing each other of opening it to scare one another. I decided I had enough at one point and pushed my bed against the door. Bad idea. The same night, with my head against the wall, I could hear something scratching at the other side of the door. I fought it off and found some sleep that night, but was quick to move my bed back to its original spot the next day. It wasn't long after that our curiosity got the best of us, and we took another peek inside. I almost immediately noticed something I hadn't before. On the opposite side of the door was a clock that even my brother claimed he hadn't seen. It was a face clock, but the hands were bent like angry eyes. And all around the face, just outside the numbers, were drawings of sharp teeth. Like, if the clock was going to bite you, it would fold itself in half to do so. This creeped me out the most, because I remembered the scratching I had heard a while back. We had far more experiences in that house, but that is the extent of the clock room as far as I can remember. The oddest part about it, the part that really creeps me out, is knowing that Irondale is ages old. So old in fact that it was once a city that had enough time to break apart and become a village. Meaning, the town was around when deformed, disabled children were tucked away in their own private quarters, where others couldn't see them. The freak show effect. So my thoughts on the subject is that this home used to house such a child, and they really didn't like it when their bedroom door was closed. That concludes tonight's video. If you have a story of your own to tell, be sure to submit it via our subreddit, r/lightsoutsecure, spelled as it is on screen now. Thank you all for listening in. If you haven't already, feel free to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to be notified of future videos. Enjoy the rest of your night, and stay safe.